Have you seen me dice bag? The Grognard Files.
Hello, my name is Dirk the Dice, and this is the Grognard Files podcast, talking bobbins about tabletop RPGs from back in the day. I'm coming live from my den under the stairs here at Dirk Towers, Bolton, UK. I'm surrounded by my stuff. If I wheel back in the chair and turn 180 degrees, I can face my small collection of board games. I've been rediscovering Battle Cars, the game of deadly driving, and the carpet is covered with little red damage squares. If I spin back round and look to the left, there's my ridiculous homemade shrine to the actor Caroline Munro. I'll give it a tap. Whoa! The dial has spun back round to Stellar Star in Star Crash, the best astropilot in the galaxy. Surely there must be some galactic jurisdiction about the standard issue clothing for convicts. Surely no right-thinking planet would confine their miscreant in nothing more than a bikini. Surely. Is there anyone we can write to? If Stellar Star has returned, then it can only mean one thing. We're returning to Traveller. I've just turned to the great library of RPGs and just pulled down the file on Traveller RPG, which we covered in some detail in episode 3. A Patreon, Fred Kish, has made a request for us to talk about our experiences of playing the Traveller adventure. Last year I put an ad on the grognardfiles.com that went something like this. I need a crew for the March Harrier, a 400-ton subsidised merchant that serves the worlds of the Aramis Trace. The subsidy is owned by a blind trust based on Regina, and the crew will have a broad discretion in selecting cargoes, destinations and charters, providing basic financial and contract obligations are met. The March Harrier has been running the assigned route for over 5 years. It's built up a credit of 80 weeks and can begin operations outside of the Aramis Trace at any time. Presently, the ship is in dock at a spaceport in Lidor, the capital of Aramis. 22 sessions later, between September 15 to July 16, we completed the campaign using Roll20, the online tabletop gaming platform. In this episode of the podcast, we'll open the box on online gaming to provide a grognard guide on how to use the Roll20 space with its webcams and its virtual tabletop and rolling dice. I'll also provide a potted guide to the Traveller adventure. This episode will spoil the adventure if you intend to be a player in it, although to be honest, as you'll see, chances are that you'll forget the minor details. I'll be opening the referee screen on some of Blythy's favourite moments from the campaign. If you've listened to episode 3, you'll know that Blythy has unresolved issues with Traveller due to his early experiences. I'm not sure whether playing the Traveller adventure helped him come to terms with the game. I'll let you decide. I also have views from other players such as Ed, the amnesiac in the shed, and others who have contributed to the postbag. Ramblers, let's get rambling.
Open box!
So, Open Box is the section of the podcast where we look back on our first experiences with the game and reflect on the games we played. We haven't got our rose-tinted spectacles on today because we're touching a bit more of a different topic. We're strictly 21st century boys because we're looking at online play. And one of the most encouraging experiences and factors of running a podcast has been the feedback we've been getting from old-time gamers and how they've gone back to playing after listening to all this bobbins. And so after reading stuff, collecting stuff, talking about it, listening to podcasts, there comes a point where you just have to play. Play's the thing. Isn't that true, Judge Blythy?
That's very true, Dirk, yes.
So I've got Blythy with me, and it is a thing, isn't it, about grognards, about us old timers, that it's difficult to get a game in. It's difficult to get the logistics of it because of family life and scheduling time together. And I suppose what online gaming does, it allows you an opportunity to play without all the palaver of getting people physically together in one space to play games. So you kind of have those stolen moments at times where no one else is there to mither you. So, Blythy, by my calculation, we've actually done twice as many game hours this year as we did last year. And that's largely down to online gaming.
Yes, yeah, it will be, won't it? Yeah. Online gaming. I think you're right. It's a funny one because you're right in that when you've got a real life like we have now, and we didn't when we were 16, we didn't really have a real life, so we could play endlessly, couldn't we? You know, we should have been revising for O levels as they were then, GCSEs, and we weren't. But now we've got a life and jobs and families. It is difficult, as you said, to get a game in because it means going to someone's house. But with online gaming, it doesn't. You know, you can be doing the washing up at 10 to 9, and by 9 o'clock you sat down to play a game of role playing. So that's a really good aspect of it, I think.
Well, what I was doing on a Wednesday, so when we had our regular game of Traveller every fortnight on a Wednesday, I was actually at 8 o'clock. I was with the kids at the swimming pool, trying to get them together, shove them in the back of the car, so I could get home at 9 o'clock to start playing again.
Yeah.
Which had been impossible to do if I was going.
You can kind of involve. You can deal with family commitments, and also get a game of role playing in, which is a great thing. It doesn't, when we play around the table at Ed's, it means that night is taken out completely because it's a commitment, like going out for the night, isn't it?
Yeah.
Commitment. And I don't think online gaming would replace that completely because there is something to be said for being out for the night.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said for that, but you can't do that too often if you've got family commitments.
No,
whereas online gaming allows you to, as you just sort of hinted at, get more games in. On the other hand, though, I think there's another interesting aspect to the online game, in that you have to be very clear with your family that you are playing an online game.
Yeah.
So, admittedly, when we played Traveller from 9 p.m. till 11, it was good in that up to 9 p.m. you could be doing stuff at home, walk the dog, do the washing up, make the tea, whatever, and then suddenly sit down and within 5 minutes, bam, you're having a game of role playing. But what you've got to be very clear about is with your family, I think, is to say, I know I've been around tonight, but 9 o'clock till 11, I'm playing Traveller or whatever game you happen to be playing. And so, could you just leave me alone, please?
Yeah.
I can't walk the dog halfway through. I'm in the house. I know I'm available, but I can't do things while I'm playing this. And I know we've both sort of suffered from that with our families, particularly kids. My son sort of appears at 9:30 and wants to, borrow a tenner.
Yeah,
I say borrow a tenner. What he means is, can I have a tenner?
Yeah.
That's what he means as a teenager.
And it is true. Somehow, though, it's more palatable for the fun prevention officer that you've not left the building.
Yes, you've not left the building. You're
still
but it's an odd thing because what I think it does is it creates the illusion of being available.
Yeah.
But you're not available.
No.
I'm not available. When I was playing Traveller, and we've had the D&D games on a Saturday morning, haven't we? We've had some of those, which are a bit longer. I've had to be very, very clear with people that from 9:30 in the morning till 1 p.m. on this particular Saturday, I will be playing D&D, and please do not interrupt me, disturb me, leave me alone. So it's sort of the illusion of availability. But what you've got to be very clear with your family is, I'm not available. I may appear to be available, but I'm not available.
To my children, they always say, are you going meeting your friends under the stairs again, Dad? Yeah. Stay away. You don't want to see them.
No, weirdos.
And it's that thing as well where, particularly on a Saturday morning, you've got family life happening around you. I remember at one point when we were doing Minds of Fandelver, I was doing one of the best NPC voices, my goblin.
Yes, goblin.
Yeah. They're my caves now. They're my caves. And Eddie's daughter said, what the hell was that? That's all we could hear off stage, wasn't it?
But the odd thing is as well, when you when you're at someone's house and there's a domestic disturbance, shall we say, so one of the kids wants something or whatever, it disturbs the whole game. So everything stops. What's odd about online gaming is one person, there'll be 5 people on screen, and one person will have some domestic disturbance. So one of the children will pop in and say, Dad, where are the crisps or something? But everyone else is carrying on. And that can be a bit strange because you've got, in a sense, 4 or 5 separate universes, separate domestic universes on screen.
All converging.
Trying to focus on one thing. But occasionally things will happen in one particular place. And as I say, that's the thing about, you have to be very clear that once you're playing an online game, you have to kind of, really, it's like being at someone's house. You have to lock yourself away and be left to your own devices. You've got to be clear with your family. This is what I'm doing. Leave me alone.
Early on, one of the things that blighted some of our games was the technical elements, wasn't it?
Yes.
So what you've really got to do is have, so we had 5 people playing. All 5 people have to be at the optimum level for it to work.
Yes, that's true. You need a good internet connection.
Yeah, so that's the first bit, isn't it? So you need to, if your Wi-Fi is a bit flaky, you're better plugging yourself into the wires.
Yes.
Or getting very close to your router. So that's one thing, isn't it? Otherwise, you end up sounding like a cross between Metal Mickey. I mean, Steve was sometimes he sounded like Metal Mickey or a fax machine.
Weird noises whirring around.
The other element that helps, we found as we went on, is headsets, isn't it? Headsets and microphones.
Get a headset. I mean, not necessarily. I've not got a headset, but you've got earphones.
Yeah.
Because what we found, I think, was if your laptop is receiving your voice and emitting voices, you get that feedback. You get that weird loop of feedback. Whereas if you plug, you don't need a microphone necessarily. I don't use a microphone. Not many people do. You don't need a microphone, but putting a headset on to hear people is, a good thing. It also means, teenage daughters don't hear your goblin voice, which is no bad thing. It's protecting your children from Dirk's goblin voice.
Yeah, there's nothing more disconcerting though than getting that echo back.
Yeah, you get your own voice
talk
back.
Yeah. Particularly as a games master, it really takes you off your stride as you're describing something. You can hear yourself relaying back.
And it's a funny one as well if your Wi-Fi connection, and as well having a decent computer, decent laptop, and a webcam. I mean, that's the other thing. You've got to remember, you need a webcam. I forget about that because obviously most laptops now have a webcam built in, but not necessarily. So you do need a webcam of some description. But what's strange about failures of the technology is that if people disappear, I mean, we had a few games of Traveller where someone disappeared midway through a game, never to return for that session because the Wi-Fi went down or the computer crashed or something strange happened, which is odd. Because it's a little bit like having a session around a table where somebody just stands up and walks out of the building and doesn't come back without any warning or explanation, which can be quite difficult. If the sword, your sword arm is raised to strike down the villain, and at that point your internet crashes.
it disappears.
You disappear, yeah.
Yeah, and you picked up on another element. So we've said about Wi-Fi connection. We've said about headsets or earphones. The other element is a decent computer with good processing power.
Yeah.
Because when I first began, I had an older laptop, and it just got really, really hot and bothered.
Yeah, I was the same. I used an old computer, and that was the same. It struggled a bit with it, but now I've got a newer laptop, and it's great. I mean, we've probably painted a strange picture now of people that have never tried it, but by and large, what's surprising is that if you do have a decent Wi-Fi connection or a decent internet connection, and a decent computer, it works remarkably well, doesn't it?
It does.
It does work remarkably well.
And there are points where it becomes invisible.
Yes, yeah. We've had games, haven't we, where the technology's worked really well, the sound's been good, everything's worked, and as you say, you almost forget that it's online.
It's great getting everybody together. However, it is different than sitting around the table. The dynamic is different. Yeah. The actual channel or medium of playing does affect the way that games work, and you have to work them differently. Yeah. I mean, I've only had a couple of instances of being a player, so just from a player point of view, what's the experience?
It works better when you have quite clear objectives as players about what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is that when you are presented as players with a series of options, as you often are in role-playing games, there's that problem of people talk over each other a bit. You've not got the body language. You've not got that those subtle kind of nuances that when people around a table are having a conversation are there. They're not there because you're just a little postage stamp-sized face on the screen. So it's difficult sometimes to have very long or complex discussions about where to go. So, for example, if you were playing a game of Cthulhu, for example, that involved lots of investigation, lots of options about who to go to, who to talk to, where to visit, what to research, I think that could, in my experience, be a little bit dangerous in terms of it might drift off a bit, get a bit dull, get a bit confusing.
Yeah, well,
that
I think
kind of thing.
I think that's true. From my thing, from observing players playing, I think it's much less of a team activity. As we've described it, people are coming from their own worlds in their own setting, so they tend to play their own game.
Yeah, there's a danger of that. Yeah,
as a games master, trying to coordinate that, you all the time trying to make sure that everybody's involving each other, and they're not just merely addressing you as a games master all the time, and that there's some discussion between them. I mean, I've actually introduced a caller to some kids, so I've actually said, right, appointed somebody, right, you give me the instructions, but just decide between you what you're going to do next, just to encourage that kind of debate and discussion that you would naturally get around the table. I think it's got better as you get more familiar with it.
It gets easier, it does get easier. But I do think the best games we've had, or the best sessions we've had, are the ones where there's been a series of clear options. Certainly when we were playing the Traveller Adventure, I often found that you, as games master, started to adopt an approach of, right, okay, you're here, there's 2 or 3 options, there's 2 or 3 things you could do. You could go and see this guy, you could go and do this, or you could go and do that. What are you going to do? And that worked a lot better because it focused everyone's minds on what the options were.
Yes.
Now, around a table, you don't often have to do that, but for some reason, online, it felt better when that was there, because there was that problem of, as I say, just a kind of drifting, like you said, people perhaps in their own little box, thinking their own thoughts, not really expressing them quite as well, like a bit of a communication barrier in some strange way. Hard to describe until perhaps you've played a game like that. But I suppose what I'm saying is, if you ran a game and said, right, this is going to be a complete sort of sandbox game, right, you're in such a city, go and make your own adventures, go and do your own investigations, do your own whatever, no matter what game it was. If you did that online, I think it'd be quite difficult for the players. Whereas the other option of saying, okay, you've got some defined goals here, so you're still making decisions, but it's a little bit, not railroady, but you've got some clear options here. So here are your options, discuss them, and then come back to the Games Master. And that approach seemed to work better than an open-ended approach of just, for example, in Traveller, right, you're on such and such a planet, what do you want to do? I think online that is fatal, because it descended into kind of a babble of people talking over each other.
I think that's true, because at the time, a time of playing and time of kind of composing those adventures, I think time constraint was part of it, because we played for 2 hours. Yeah. So you've got to set the scene and get to the dramatic beats of the adventure quicker, haven't you? Because you can't really afford to have the drifting around, chatting with the patron, that kind of thing. You've got to really kind of bounce to the points of action. So time constraint is part of it. But you're right, the dynamic of players talking to each other and interacting is slower and encumbered as well, isn't it?
Although as you say, we got better at it, I think. Yeah. And maybe if we did play a more open-ended game now with the players we've been playing with, it might work better. I don't know. Maybe it's just practice. Maybe it's just getting to the hang of playing in that way.
I think as a Games Master, because I've mainly Games Mastered these, haven't I? When we've been playing, it takes a bit of getting used to. Because what you're faced with, if you can imagine this, you're faced with 4 or 5 people just staring. Not at you, but slightly to the side, because they're looking at somewhere else. So the camera,
yes, that's right.
The camera's above the screen, and they're kind of looking, and you're kind of thinking, as you're talking and explaining something, you're thinking, he hasn't moved for a bit. What's he doing? What's he looking at? He's looking over there. So it's all these things are going through your head as you're kind of explaining things. He's not moved. I
feel that as a player as well, because people who don't move much, you assume the screen may have frozen. Yeah, they're not really there. Yeah, just a face looking back at you. They're not really there. He's falling offline. It's just a frozen image.
It's like looking at 4 lizards, kind of looking at you, but not looking at you, just in case.
Yeah. What you need people to do is fidget. You need people to fidget. I'm quite a fidgeter, so I'm all right. I look like I'm still there.
so that element, and I think early on, particularly I've mentioned previously about the Stormbringer game that I ran, I felt like I had to talk to overcompensate for lack of player involvement. So because I wasn't getting anything in return, so around the table you're getting feedback all the time.
There's a little. This is what I was saying. I think you become very aware of those nuances of personal interaction that you take for granted face to face. You're not even aware of them face to face, but when you're suddenly online, there's something slightly odd, and that's what it is. I think you're missing those unconscious clues, eye contact, body language, just that thing that you're not really conscious of when you communicate with another human being face to face, but they are missing online, and it is slightly unsettling. I know that I ran a game of Cthulhu online, and I found it. This was back when we were just getting the hang of it, and I found it really difficult to create any kind of suspense or atmosphere that you might need for Cthulhu. And it fell a bit flat, I felt. But I think the reason for that is because you're not round a table in a room, you lose some of that sense of, the players lose it from the Games Master, and the Games Master loses it from the players. And if you're trying to create that atmosphere, it's a difficult trick to master. I think now we've probably mastered it, but it takes a while.
Yeah, and I think I've got better at it in terms of coordinating it. So, as you've mentioned before, I've found that it's best to kind of throw things out there.
Yes.
Let you toy with it. Yeah. And then just intervene to say, right,
what are you going to do?
Where's it going next?
Yeah, absolutely. that works quite well.
Yeah. So it is a learning thing. I mean, it just we're giving the impression that it's not a very fulfilling experience, but it is. I think you just have to accept that it is different.
You have to accept it's different, and you have to get used to it. It's a much more enjoyable experience now than it was at first. I think the first few games we had online, we were a little bit sceptical of it.
We were, but we started off by doing things that were just far too complicated. We tried doing a RuneQuest 6 game, which was quite complicated, and the combat is complicated. Keeping track of the bookkeeping is more difficult. Because you've got all different facilities such as character sheets, etc., built into something like Roll20, but we haven't used those.
No.
And it's a bit unwieldy to have all of that on screen, I think.
It is. I mean, Roll20 is really good. I mean, let's say product placement in the podcast, but Roll20 is good because... and I think it's worth talking about Roll20 as well, because we tried things on Google Hangouts, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
But the problems with things like that are, it's like dice rolling. How do you roll? A Roll20 is good because it rolls dice and everyone can see the dice roll.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
And it also gives you like a virtual tabletop, so you can scribble
plans and
scribble plans on there.
Yeah.
And as we've got more advanced with the Mines of Fandelver, we've got this fog of war kind of thing, so it can reveal areas as you're going into different rooms. It reveals it, and I think recently they've currently taken the license, haven't they, from Wizards of Course?
Yes.
Of actually producing modules that are compatible with Roll20, so you can buy it ready made.
But I think it's worth mentioning that's how we play it, because I wonder, how it would be different if you just did it on Skype.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have all those facilities, would you?
No.
Of dice rolling and plan. You wouldn't necessarily have those facilities. What we're using is a custom-made website that's made for role-playing games online.
Yeah.
And that brings with it, others may be available, but that brings with it certain benefits for the purposes of doing what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it would work if you didn't have those things. It might be a bit odd if you were, I don't know, rolling dice on Skype and pointing the camera at the dice. But that said, you think you're right in that some of the things might become a bit unwieldy, and I think that's another big factor with online play, that game systems that involve a lot of bookkeeping and are quite detailed are tricky. Are a bit tricky. Traveller it's
all right, and I think the way I was playing it was light on its feet. Anyway, I mean, we're going to talk a bit more in depth about how we ran the Traveller game, but it probably had more in keeping with Fate than it did with Traveller, because I played a bit faster and loose. It wasn't one for Traveller purists, particularly towards the end.
No. And we've played 5th edition D&D online. That's worked quite well because, again, it's a relatively simple system. Whereas RuneQuest 6 was
lots of crunch.
A bit of a nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to run that online, bit tricky.
I'd like to have another go at it,
Yeah.
and I'm due to have a game of RuneQuest 2 online, and I'd like to see how that works, because Stormbringer was alright. Stormbringer's
alright. Stormbringer's quite but again, Stormbringer is more basic role playing than RuneQuest.
Yeah.
So you're missing certain complexities
and things like that. Yeah.
But because I do think that having a simple system that's quite fluid works better online.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how crunchy systems would work.
No.
Maybe it's just us. I don't know, but the way it feels.
To me, though, the best element of it, so we've already said that it's increased our capacity to play games in these stolen moments. It's like having an affair, isn't it?
An affair with a role-playing game.
Stealing the moments in those quiet corners of the day when nobody cares. But the best thing about it is something that we've craved for 30 odd years, and that's to play with different people and other players.
Yes.
And that has been by far the best revelation of it. It's, we've had people joining us across the country. We want people who want to play with us from all over the world. And that is great. Recently, I've had to do a ballot for Patreon games. So every 6 months, running a game online for patrons. I had to run a ballot and turn people away. It has never been known to turn people away from the table.
Quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
To turn people away. And it's funny, isn't it? It's still a peculiar hobby from that point of view. If you exclude social media and online stuff, it's still a peculiar hobby because you don't really meet that many people who play role-playing games.
No.
You really don't.
We'd be hard pressed to muster people together in Bolton. And it's
locally.
It's quite a big town, isn't it?
It is still a strange thing that you get fooled a bit by social media because you don't go on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and it's full of people who play role-playing games. But of course, they're drawn from all over the country or all over the world. So it seems a bigger community now than it did back in the 80s, but it probably isn't. It isn't. I know our experiences at Dragon Meet, for example. I think we commented on this in another podcast. We went to Dragon Meet expecting it somehow to be bigger and vaster than Games Day back in the 80s, but it wasn't. It was kind of the same. It was kind of the same thing. So there is still that problem of finding people to play, and on online gaming is great because you can find other people.
And I think we should leave it on that because it is great.
It is great. I mean, we've talked about some of the complexities of it and tricky bits of it, but put it this way, we're not going to stop, are we?
No,
we're going to keep on playing online.
Because, like I said at the beginning, it's feeding the habit. There comes a point where you just have to play.
You have to play. It's no good talking about it anymore. You've got to do it.
Okay, you're going to come back and talk about it for a bit more.
I'll talk about it for a bit more. It's the second best thing, talking about it.
When we talk about the travel adventure.
Yes.
Thanks, Blythy.
All right.
Potted history.
There's a great moment in the Tony Scott film True Romance where Christopher Walken is torturing Dennis Hopper for information. He says, I won't do the voice. Now what we've got here is a little game of show and tell. You don't want to show me nothing, but you're telling me everything. So it is with traveller supplements from back in the day. They want to show you everything, but they tell you nothing. And it's the same with the Traveller Adventure. The 160-page trade paperback was much bigger than the usual digest-sized little black books, packed with apparent detail, but when it comes to playing, it often leaves a referee scratching his or her head, wondering what to do. Written by Frank Chadwick and friends, it was originally released in 1983 as a companion piece to the newly formatted rules. The makeover of the rules, in the form of the Traveller book, was distributed by Prentice Hall into bookshops in order to extend the reach beyond the usual gamer audience. With illustrations by Liz Danforth, Steve Crompton and others, the production had a great visual appeal. For the purposes of our campaign, I used the Mongoose reprint that's still available. It standardised some of the illustrations and they're not quite as good as the originals, but it's made some of the text more readable too. In the process, they've managed to transfer some of the glaring errors from the original. For example, there's no means of getting from one level of the building to another at the Church of Isney. But these are minor quibbles. The book provides everything that the referee needs to create adventures in the Aramis subsector, a backwater almost out of the reach of the Imperium, where rival megacorp shipping lanes are vying for trade routes on the edge of the Varga extents. The last time I attempted to describe the plot of the adventure, Blythy suggested it sounded more like an enterprise allowance scheme, so I'll try better here. Aaron Ashkaskar is a high-level employee of the megacorp Takira Lines. He's the head of the Vermine at the covert security operation. He's concocted an elaborate switch of high-powered meson guns destined for a navy base. He has a buyer for the weaponry, the mercenary pirate band of Varga known as the Kaffursing. He's put the details of payment and the drop-off arrangements in a communicator disguised as a brooch. There's also a smaller subplot concerning stern metal and a chancer known as Banerjee. They're using the hapless trader to lead a smuggling operation to bypass Imperium restrictions on ore used in spacecraft. There's actually enough in this campaign to keep the story going on for years. However, I'm aware that there are examples of the campaign running over a convention weekend. The supplement reflects the spirit of the age, a period in the 1980s where there was a desire to create a sandbox to explore. There's additional patrons, there's descriptions of different planets. But there's a need to have a competitive experience needed in the 70s too. And an evidence that narrative is important, and there's moments in this campaign where it feels really railroady. Okay, without further ado, let's meet the team. Okay, first up is Captain Olaf Eli Thompson, played by Steve, otherwise known as Captain Ollie. Taciturn, practical, reasonable, and often ignored by his crew. He descended into madness and eventually stripped of his captaincy by human resources due to his persistent casual absence caused by psionic meltdown. Pilot Frank, played by Joe, was neurotic, allergic, but eager to please. There were moments when Frank needed to bluff his way out of a situation, and he got through it, but came out in hives due to his anxieties. He just wanted his moment of bravery, his moment to shine, and that came in the finale. Engineer Franco, played by Ben, was corpulent, wise, and a crack shot when it was needed. He was keen to strike a hard deal and not afraid to face down senior representatives when he needed to. Brett Mouser, played by Eddie, the ship's medic. Well, as you'll discover, he was rubbish as a medic. Anyone taking low berth on the March Harrier put their lives at risk. But he was a master tactician, and when they were in trouble, it was usually Brett that pulled them out of it. Bert, played by Hal, the mild-mannered steward who pleaded peace and harmony at the beginning, but ended up unleashing hell and damnation, shrewd and ruthless. Finally, Gavudzen, the Varga, played by Blythy, quietly controlling and, well, don't hear it from me. Let the dogs out.
GAMESMASTERS SCREEN.
Hello, Blythy.
Hello, Dirk.
So, when we first got together in 2010 after our period of deep freeze, it was to play the big campaigns from back in the day. So we had Masks of Nyarlathotep.
Yes, we played that.
Borderlands.
Yeah.
Griffin Mountain.
Yeah.
And so last year I became a bit obsessed with Traveller when we did the podcast. And so we started to play the big campaign, the Traveller Adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, what we're doing here is taking our navel gazing, either
one, really,
to another dimension here.
Yeah.
Because we're getting down to the fluff, aren't we? The molecular structure of the fluff.
The navel fluff.
Yeah. So what we're going to do in this section is look in detail at the Traveller Adventure and the things that happened and how it went.
Yeah.
Playing. So we played this online, as we described before, and we should also say that we've actually played it 2 times previously.
Yes, this was the 3rd time we played it. Yeah.
Did that help?
No, because it was entirely different. There's only one bit that we'll come on to, I'm sure, that was the same, or had a semblance of being the same, but the rest of it was quite a bizarre experience. That my memory's not that bad. It's not that bad, and it just felt very, very different, from the other times that we played it. But I think, and the reason for that is, and I'm sure you'll talk about this, is that like all traveller adventures, it's a bit sketchy in places, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of scope for. You look at that 2 ways. You can look at it, I've given you some money, Games Designers Workshop, and you've given me a sketchy adventure. Can I have my money back? Or you could, in a more positive way, say that it gives you as a games master the opportunity to flesh things out, emphasise some bits, not emphasise other bits, and develop certain bits here and there. But when you do that, it does make it feel very different, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a bit different from the normal traveller adventures. So when you think of like Twilight's Peak and all those other ones.
All the others.
All the other ones.
Whose names elude us.
Their names elude us, yeah. They were very sketchy. I mean, in terms of resources, you probably get more with the travel adventure than you do with some of the others. I think the challenge from being a referee, I think it was challenging. Mainly, I'll put it in one word: motivation.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that's true for players as well, actually.
Yeah. So I think with the whole adventure, it was based around this idea that you were happy being space truckers and that you were driven by the desire to make as much money as possible and to finance the ship, the travelling you did, and to get sufficient cargo to move. And that is your prime motivation.
There's one problem with that motivation, though, isn't there?
No.
With a role-playing game that focuses on getting money, it's not real money.
No.
Not real money, is it?
No.
So you can't do anything with it. It's like getting lots of gold pieces. You can't do anything with it, and it's particularly true in Traveller because at least in other role-playing games, the acquisition of money can lead to to character advancement. So in RuneQuest you can buy spells. In Travel you can't do anything with it. No. You can say people. I can remember when we played it, people would say, "Oh, great, we're earning 1 million credits."
Yeah.
Okay. What are we going to do with that? Is that enough to buy a bigger spaceship? No, it's not. Oh, right. Okay. Well, we'll put that in the bank.
Well, I think originally, I think part of it is down to the format that we use. So we were meeting every fortnight for 2 hours. And I suppose I didn't want that 2 hours to become dominated by an accountancy exercise.
Yeah, I don't want to become accountants.
So we wanted adventure in our travel adventure.
Yeah.
And so as a kind of compromise, I did initially think that in between sessions that we'd have a kind of play by email where all the kind of trade elements were dealt with and resolved.
Yeah.
And listener Sam Vale actually sent us a PBEM, a play-by email, that kind of did that, so that you were commercial truckers in space, and all the kind of motivation was to kind of get as much value from the journey as possible. But I don't think you can do that, and I think the travel adventure was all of the different episodes seem to start with the words, the players are at a loose end, or the players are unable to get cargo, or the players are stuck in this space station.
Yeah. I mean, we've discussed this previously in the Traveller podcast, but there is a problem generally, I think, with motivation in Traveller for player characters because, as we said before, there's no alignment, there's no cults, there's no sense of good or evil, there's no sense of much. So you have to build in motivations to have them there because they're not naturally in the game.
No.
But yeah, it doesn't really build them in. particularly well.
So as I say, with the way I structured this around the 2-hour session was to see it a bit like a TV serial.
Yeah.
Now, there's good things and bad things about that. I think the good things were that it was very task-focused, as you said previously, and it always seemed to end conveniently on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And there was always kind of a narrative drive and focus to it because of that format. I think the difficulty with it, for me as a games master, when I reflect on it, it ended up being like a TV serial in that some of its parts were better than the whole.
Yeah, and that's true. There were some great sort of episodes, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Yeah, that were good in themselves, but the overarching plot is a little bit weak. I mean, I had a particular problem, didn't I? Because I played Gavudzen, who's a Varga, and he's not part of the crew. And you have the choice, don't you, of him being an NPC,
yes,
or a player. Does it recommend that he's a player?
Yes,
it recommends he's a player. And Gavudzen has a brooch, and this brooch is actually a communications device which he's stolen from a gang of Varga pirates, a big organised crime network.
The Kafur-Seng.
The Kafur-Seng, yeah. And that all sounds very exciting, and it's quite exciting, isn't it? That's kind of an exciting element of it. But what I found really, really difficult as Gavudzen was that you're almost in cahoots with the games master to some extent. I mean, you're not in cahoots because you don't know the plot. You're not privy to any particular special information, but you're sort of in cahoots with the games master in that you have to make the players interested in this brooch that's being pursued by various parties. But what you find is it's very difficult to do that because they're not really interested in it. They're not interested in it at all. There's nothing to stop you selling the brooch.
No.
And to some extent, there's an element of sense in that. Do you know what? We've got all these people trying to kill us for this brooch, which we don't understand. We can't crack the code. Tell you what, let's just give it to someone and not die. You know? And there's an element, and it's difficult because Gavudzen, as a character, is presented as someone who wouldn't sell the brooch because he's got the kind of Varga status thing and he wants his status back in the gang and all this kind of thing. But that's difficult to push across to the players who are a crew, like you say, of space truckers making money. Why are they taking him on? Why they take this Varga on board who brings all sorts of trouble? Why would they? They only do it because I'm a player character.
Yeah.
Because it's Blythy on the screen and they don't want to be rude and say, oh, we'll just kick Blythy out. Sorry, you can't play anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a slightly artificial
and
thing.
It would have been more difficult if that was an NPC because then you would be more at liberty.
More inclined to kick him out, yeah. Who's
exactly.
this Gavudzen character? Let's just get rid of him then.
So the way that it worked really was like a series of one-shots rather than a campaign. And prior to recording this, we kind of went to the people involved who played with us and asked for their feedback. And I think, although there was a lot of love over it because many of these people who joined our group had not played for a long, long time. So that was a really good thing. It was really good to get people playing who Hal had never played before. He'd never played role-playing before. The rest of the gang were playing after a hiatus of 30-odd years. And there's a lot of love there. But I think what was missing, and I think we all concede, is this sense of character development. So because it didn't feel like a continuing story, because you had those 2-hour slots where you're in media res, character development didn't really happen. Gavudzen was probably one of the most fleshed out characters. The rest were really caricatures. We had great fun with the caricatures. The neurotic pilot.
The medic who never made a medic role. Fake doctor. That was my view. I stick to it. Fake medical certificates. Never made one medic role in the whole game.
The obese engineer who was a crack shot and always looking for the book. So there's like these characters, but it did feel like that, a TV serial thing, and that's what was sacrificed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We had great episodes, but the sum total of the series was somehow felt like something was missing.
And I think the backstory, the overarching plot. You see, if you compare it to something like Massive Nathlitep, which has this kind of overarching plot of, you know, the rise of an Nathlitep and the end of the world and that kind of thing, although it's episodic, so you do London, you do Egypt, you do various other places, there is a sense in which that overarching plot is ever present, and it's always in your mind that something's going on. You very quickly pick up that something's going on. You're up against a deadline, there's some great conjunction of the stars or something like that, so you have that sense, it's always there. So even though there's in Massive Nathlitep there were great episodes, it was always there.
Yeah.
I think in Traveller Adventure it wasn't there.
Yeah.
We had great episodes, but there was no real sense of the overarching plot.
Yeah, well, the plot was really two things, wasn't it? So the first thing was that these meson guns had been stolen by some entity, and they were somewhere being used for something.
But you don't really work that out until well into it.
Yeah,
you see, that's one of the things. When that becomes apparent and you get enough information to work that out, it takes off a little bit, because then you think, right, so someone's got these really powerful weapons. That's a bit worrying. But there's a long period before that where you don't know that.
And then the other subplot is this idea of Banerjee, who is doing a smuggling operation for stern metal, but that's kind of has no bearing on the overarching plot. So there's like two twin plots. One gets resolved in the at the end of the second act, and then in the third act the stolen meson guns really comes in, doesn't it? And that's where that plot. And you're right, it's tough to do an elevator pitch for the actual conspiracy.
Yeah.
To describe the conspiracy is quite complicated.
And it's also a bit dull.
Yeah.
Dare I say it? The conspiracy bit of the Traveller is just a bit dull, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you think, well, what? Someone's stolen some big guns. All right.
And what does it matter to you?
What does it matter to you? We come back to that, don't we?
Yeah.
That actually it doesn't matter much. And even for Gavoodzin, it doesn't really matter much for Gavoodzin particularly.
No.
So it doesn't matter for the players, the rest of the players. It doesn't matter.
No.
You know, so it's hard to hook them in, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
if they were kind of, I don't know, intergalactic policemen or something, whose job was to stop that kind of thing, then you'd think, well, yeah, there's a motivation there, but there isn't really, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the point. I don't know. Maybe that's the intention, that you can ignore it. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because there are times, and I think I've said this to you, that it's a bit railroady. So because there's a kind of assumption that Gavoodzin is going to be a key player, some of the things that happen to Gavoodzin have to happen in order for the narrative to continue, progress, which I felt uncomfortable about, so I untangled those bits. So the expectation is that you will follow this procedural narrative to its conclusion. So, okay, with all that bobbins out of the way, talking about the overall picture, let's look at some of the specifics and have a roll on the table. We need to erect our referee screen here.
Yeah, go on.
Up it goes.
2d6.
2d6, it's a d66 again.
Boring dice roll.
Okay, and it's 1 and a 6, so that's 16. And it comes back to the brooch at Lidor, so it's the opening session. Not everybody turned up to this one, did they? But the idea of this one is you have to break into the Lidor Museum.
Yes, that's right. Well, you find Gavoodzin, don't you? So Gavoodzin, I don't think it was the first session, was it? I think it was the second session.
Right.
Because there was the introductory bit, and then there's a bit on Lidor where you find Gavoodzin, who's been beaten up by some men in black, some shadowy figures have beaten him up, and they're after this brooch. But he's pawned the brooch, hasn't he?
Yes.
Because he's kind of down on his luck, and the pawnbroker, he's gone back to the pawnbroker.
Yeah.
Pawnbroker. Would they have pawnbrokers in the future? I mean, we'll come on to this, won't we?
Yeah.
There's instances, I think, in this opening adventure where you find a business card and a wallet.
Yeah.
A business card and a wallet.
Well,
this is tens of thousands of years in the future.
I imagine it as more of a futuristic cash generator. So in the window they've got an electric guitar, an orbital sander, and a brooch.
Yeah, and a brooch. Yeah. Well, they've not got it in the window, have they? Because the pawnbroker sells it. He sells it, doesn't he, to the museum?
Yeah.
And so this particular episode, Gavudson recruits the crew to break into the museum to liberate his brooch. But again, we come back to the question of motivation. Why on earth would they? Some dodgy varga that you find says, "Tell you what, fellas, I know you're a bunch of space traders and have no experience in burglary. Would you mind helping me steal something from a museum?" "No problem, Mr. Gavudson. We're on the case." Yeah. Why? I mean, I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
But of course,
it would have ended quite soon.
But at the same time, I think it was Hal and Eddie who turned up to that one. So it was just two players and me, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it was two crew and me. And to be fair, it worked quite well because there was the idea that they were off drinking and maybe were slightly drunk when they agreed to burgle the museum, which does work quite well.
What was quite good about Brett and Bert, so Eddie and Hal's character, is that they were the only salaried members of the crew.
Yes.
So whatever happened, they didn't get any cut
of it, did they?
No.
Yeah, they just got a salary. So maybe they were motivated to rob a museum. I don't know. but joking apart, it does come back to that thing of, in a way, they agree to do it because I'm a player character.
Yes.
And it's just part of the game. This is part of the game, and if you don't liberate the brooch one way or another.
The break-in was interesting because you can use a number of different strategies, and I think back in the day, this is one that we remember.
This one I remember this bit. Yeah, I do remember that.
And I think when we did this, and Eddie was the referee, we did some kind of distraction during daylight opening hours and stole it that way. Yeah. But you chose to do a break-in at night, didn't you? Yeah. And what was interesting, something that we wouldn't have considered back in 1983, is that instantly Bert came up with a strategy of hacking into the computer network, which had never crossed our mind about that.
That's what we knew hacking was.
No.
Really, then? Did we?
No.
I think it was, but it wasn't something you imagined you could do. So interesting. Give you a kind of modern perspective, a 21st century perspective on a 20th century science fiction adventure that doesn't have hacking in it. And we did a lot of that in the game, actually. I think it was interesting that there was a lot of that kind of thing of, can we hack into the comms of the other ship? Can we hack into this? Can we hack into that? Can we use the ship's computer to tell us something about this? And there was an inclination, I think, on your part to kind of go along with that because it seemed reasonable. Because it seems reasonable now.
Yes.
So you've got Google. It's like the ship's computer. Yeah. Ship's computer has a library data. Well, we'll type something. There's nothing. There's nothing about that planet. Well, you couldn't really say that, can you? Because Google now, it's all there. So why isn't it there then?
Yes. Yeah.
There's an odd thing, I think, about translating a vision of the future from the 70s, when it was late 70s? A late 70s vision of the future being played sort of some way in the future.
But I liked that, and I know that a number of people playing enjoyed that element of it. Is that although I did allow some things, other things I said, well, this is a vision of the future from the 70s, so everything's a bit clunky. It's Space 1999, isn't it? It's that kind of it's like you mentioned, like the business card, the wallet, that kind of thing. Everything was very physical.
Flashing lights on. Yeah. Consoles with flashing lights.
Yeah, and I think we had a final scene, didn't we, in the finale, where you entered a room where it was like just a mainframe computer that filled acres of.
That's right.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. 21, Pasadi. So Pasadi was a planet that you visited, and the motivation for visiting this planet, well, one of the motivations was that Horwood grows there, and Horwood is the material that the brooch is made out of. So I think the primary motivation was to try and find out what properties it had and that kind of thing. And Posada's a low-tech planet with a theocracy running the affairs of the planet. This was really the first time that you were in a kind of alien environment, wasn't it? Quite, because all the rest have been kind of spaceporty.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed this one. This is probably my favourite episode, actually, Posada, because it was that thing of there were aliens, there were these little monkey creatures that were like aliens. Yeah. And we think we fought a bear thing that was an alien, a space bear. You know, it wasn't a bear, but it looked like a bit of a bear. We had a fight with some alien monsters. There were the little monkeys that had special healing powers. So I don't know how much of this you invented. Did you invent the healing powers? Is that in here?
Yeah, well, part of the shtick on this planet is that the anolas, which are like a monkey race, and there's a very detailed description of the ecology and how they live their lives and everything. The whole shtick is that they kind of befriend the crew, and the crew become a bit besotted with them. Yeah. And the idea is that then you take the monkeys and you took them into the village, and they're sacred monkeys. The anolas are sacred.
That's right. Yeah.
And so therefore they had a particular affection for Bert, and they announced him as some kind of messiah.
That's right.
Because he'd been chosen by the anolas.
Then locked him away.
Now because I knew I was dealing with battle-hardened role players who are cynical in their natural tendencies, I thought this is going to be impossible to pull off. You're not going to fall for monkeys that are...
No.
I remember Eddie's Brett saying, don't
yes,
don't let them come with us.
Yeah. I think we were all of that sort of opinion, with the exception of perhaps one of us. Yeah. The exception of let's get rid of the monkeys. I think at one point we just quietly killed the monkeys when no one's looking, because the monkeys followed us around, didn't they? Because they had an attachment to Bert.
But I knew that you would be instantly suspicious of them unless I souped up their abilities. Yeah. And one of the abilities that they had was to heal.
Yes.
And so you all kind of got used to the idea, became useful.
Yeah, become useful.
And you kind of then forgot that they could be dangerous, and they followed you around on a number of your travels. You even fought to get them through the quarantine. Yeah, smuggled them in.
Well, they became like walking healing potions, didn't they? So when you were hit, and I think to harvest the wood, the big trees, we had to blow them up, didn't we? Yeah. We couldn't cut them down because the wood was so hard. And we had some explosive fun, didn't we? We did. Explosive disasters that left some of us badly injured. So we were grateful that the monkeys healed us. And you're right, that meant they kind of latched onto us. But I think there was a point when a few of us twigged that these things were becoming a problem. Yeah. But Hal, playing Bert, wouldn't really buy it, would he? No, he entered into the role of being the Messiah until the point when he was locked away by the sort of religious leaders. They kind of said, "Oh, well, you're the chosen one. You're staying here." And he was taken prisoner, effectively. Yeah. Then he had a very different view of it.
And I suppose that's where the pattern of the campaign started to emerge. So what I found was that the episodes, I found this in Master and Off the Tap as well, is that there was for similar beats. So something would happen, and then you would have to rescue somebody, or something. And this was one of the first that he was trapped, and so he had to make an audacious rescue attempt.
Yeah. See, the plot kind of develops, and then there comes a point where you hit a brick wall of sorts that you need to resolve in some form of conflict. But I like Posada because it felt, and I think sometimes Traveller does lack this. It felt like science fiction role playing. It felt like one of those old 1960s Star Trek episodes. Yeah. So in Star Trek where they land on a planet, don't they? It's always a bit low tech because obviously they're using the sets from, you know, Cleopatra or a Western, something like that. They always land on a planet where it's incredible. It's like the Wild West, isn't it? Yes, that's the technological level they're at, and they have all the costumes and sets. But it felt like one of those kind of episodes where, you know, you land on the planet, it's a bit weird, it's a bit low tech, there's some aliens, there's some religious people, and it all goes a bit wrong. And in some ways, I suppose, it was a little bit cliche. There was a touch of Life of Brian about it, wasn't there? He was
well, certainly the way I played it.
It was, yeah. But there's an element of farce about it because, of course, it's a bit of a cliche. You know, they think you're a god. Oh, great, haha! But that means, you know, they're going to lock you in a tower. There's a bit of cliche about it, but it did seem like science fiction role playing. We were on another planet where there was a different culture. And there were alien monsters and alien creatures and some weird stuff going on that felt odd. Whereas, as you say earlier, and in later ones, you were in a spaceport and everything was just like, I don't know, like a business role-playing game of sorts. So I really enjoyed Passardi because it was exciting, it was action-packed, but it also felt like science fiction.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was what was good about it.
And of course, he's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. Right. 32. And this is Aramanx. So this was part of the Banerjee plot. You had Horwood to sell, and you'd arranged to meet with delegates of Stern Metal to sell them Horwood. And in the middle of the transaction, war breaks out and the building is torpedoed and you find yourself in the middle of a war zone and you need to find your way across country, grabbing anything you can to get to some neutral territory. And Banerjee offers neutral space in Rinitsa across the border. So you have to travel long distance to Rinitsa. So it's kind of now get out of this one shot convention type thing, really, of, you know, that things are going to get thrown at you and you've got to escape from it. So how did it feel playing it?
Well, again, it's quite exciting. It didn't feel quite as science fiction-y as Passardi, but it had that kind of action that was interesting and exciting, that something was happening, which again, there are bits of the travel adventure where that's not the case, where you can negotiate in, you know, a percentage on some cargo, which as part of you thinks, oh, come on, can we shoot something? Can we shoot something?
Well, I felt that compulsion, because as soon as it was introduced in Passardi, I think that's the thing, isn't it? That as soon as you give a flavour of actual adventure, you kind of crave for more as a player, don't you? Now, I've got that sense.
You crave for more, and I think as a games master, it's good to see players responding to it. Players respond to it, don't they? Yeah. Players respond to get out of that situations. And even if they're not the most original situation, because again, I wouldn't say it was the most original scenario. It is literally just, oh dear, you're in a war zone, you weren't expecting that, you're ill prepared, you're going to have to survive and get through it. So it's not particularly original, but I suppose it demonstrates how sometimes with role-playing games, they don't have to be original, do they?
No.
Because the difference is you as a player are in that situation. So whilst it might be a bit of a cliche or not very original, if you're in that situation, it becomes exciting. And it's good to see people responding to that and making decisions.
This episode was good as well because it introduces the Kforcing, so the Varga mercenaries, and the ruthlessness and ferocity in battle. So you got a sense of the danger that you were facing in terms of what would come up in exploring the maison gun things. So you knew what you were up against, and so that's the. And I think there was a very tense moment. I think you might have missed this one, where there was a Mexican standoff when they eventually got to the mines, the Stern Metal mines, and I
remember Hal pulling a gun.
Yeah, he pulled a gun.
He pulled a gun on somebody and held it to their head. I think what was interesting about Hal was he Hal's what, 21?
21,
21. And he'd never played a role-playing game before, had he?
Yeah.
At least not a tabletop role-playing game. And what was very interesting about Hal's trajectory as a player was he went from being a very reasonable, cautious player to sort of slightly insane. But I think it's because he realised the beauty of role-playing games where you really can do what you want.
Yes.
You can do what you want.
Yeah.
And he decided in certain points to do what he wanted. And sometimes what was doubly interesting was, and I think Aramanx is a good example, he did something there that the rest of us as cautious, seasoned role players would think that's insane. Don't pull a gun and point it to someone's head and say, right, you know, I'm going to shoot him in the head unless you do what I say. Because you kind of think, a Games Master's going to bring you down for that. But he did it, and you know what, it worked.
It worked,
It actually worked.
Yeah.
And that's there's a kind of beautiful, not naivety is the wrong word, but a sense of, I'm playing a role-playing game, I've never really done this before, and what I've worked out over the last few weeks is you can do whatever the hell you want. So you know what I'll do? I will do what I want.
Yeah.
And when you're a seasoned role player, sometimes you lose sight of that, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, you play by the conventions, you know, of,
Yeah.
oh no, don't do that. Don't do that at this point. Don't do that then. We'll do that later. And playing by conventions, where someone who's never played it before just did stuff.
Yeah.
He just did stuff out of the blue.
And he had a good instinct of how to kind of push the buttons and get it to accelerate the action really. But there was a really good tense Mexican standoff, which was then broken by the Kavorsang unleashing hell and a high speed chase.
I mean, I think what, in some ways, Aramanx, to be a bit critical of travel adventure, I think what Aramanx demonstrates as well is how the Kavorsang should have been brought in sooner.
Yes.
I think if you'd have brought them in sooner, it would have been much more exciting, and it would have focused people's minds a little bit. So if the players had known that the brooch that Kavorsang's got is being pursued by these vicious gangsters, vicious space pirates, if that had been early on, I think people would have focused more on the brooch, because the brooch lies at the centre of it all. And yet it was incredibly difficult. Because I think we had a running joke between ourselves, didn't we? That I mentioned the brooch in every session.
Yeah.
I think every session I would say, anyway, but this brooch I've got, it's a bit strange, isn't it, that people want it? And everyone would just go, yeah, I suppose. Anyway, and talk about something else. Whereas I think if you brought the Kavorsang in earlier, if the adventure brought them in earlier, it would focus people's minds on what needed to be focused on. And it's very, very difficult to get players to focus on that brooch.
Yeah,
it really is.
It really is, yeah. Okay. 66. Oh, this is a fumble.
Oh, dear.
So this was... I was dreading this episode before we even did it. But this is the famous travel adventure episode in Zilla, the planet of Zilla, which is a planet that's renowned for it's got a high law level, so it's a very bureaucratic planet, and you have to get certain waivers and landing permits in order to transport some wine and open up a trade route. Now,
we've played this 3 times.
We've played this 3 times.
And this is the bit I remember the most from the 3 times we've played it.
Yeah.
Because I think when Eddie ran it, and we were about 13, 14 years old.
13, yeah.
He just sort of more or less ignored it.
He hand waved it away. I'm not having you chasing around these office buildings in search of a piece of paper.
And I think it's fair to say at the time, we thought, oh, well, that's a bit of a shame. That might be quite interesting.
Yeah.
Until the second time we played it, which was at a guy called Tom's house. And Tom and some of those players were a bit older than us, weren't they?
Yeah.
And he played it. He ran it straight. So he ran it. We were stuck on that bureaucracy planet for weeks. And weeks. Yeah. At that point, we thought, I think Eddie made the right decision.
Yes, I think so.
Because it was so boring.
So the idea it's designed, I think as we said in the previous episode when we were talking about it, the whole thing's designed to get the players really frustrated and end up turning a gun on the officials.
Absolutely. Shoot your way off, basically,
But the other idea is that you kind of role play each bureaucrat. So you would have underlings and middle managers before you could actually get to the person who could sign off your papers.
Yeah.
So you needed to wine and dine officials, take them out, offer briberies. Some people objected to briberies. A complicated web of going from one place to another to get this form, that form. Now I had an idea of turning it into like a game, so gaming it, and I set up the list of what you had to achieve, and the idea is that we'd have a series of dice rolls to see how this would play out. Yeah. But after 20 minutes, I got fed up of hearing my own voice.
Even you got bored of your own game.
Yeah. And so I gave a buyout option. You could buy out of the bribe your way out of it.
And you know what? We chose to buy our way out. Do you know why we did that? Because it's not real money. I come back to that point. It's not real money. Yeah. This is going to cost you 50,000 credits. Oh, is it? How many credits have we got? We've got 500,000. We'll spend it then, because it's not real money. Yeah. There you go. It's easy when it's not real money.
Yeah.
You know. But I think what's interesting about the bureaucracy planet, which we've done 3 times, and it's fair to say in all 3 instances, in different ways it's failed. If you excuse the joke, it looks good on paper.
It does look.
It does look good, but it does look good on paper, and it looks like, yes, I see. It's going to frustrate them, and they're going to turn to, as you say, pulling a gun or breaking the law to try and get off the planet. That, in theory, sounds good, but it doesn't work.
No,
it doesn't work because you either get a situation where the problem is with it, I think the natural progression of that adventure is that you do try and do it legitimately. So even if you end up shooting your way off the planet, eventually you're going to spend several sessions trying to do it properly, aren't you?
Yeah.
And then when you end up shooting your way off, it just feels like you wasted your time. You just wasted a lot of valuable role-playing time messing about when you could have done that at the beginning. Yeah. But generally speaking, you're not going to do that at the beginning because you're led to believe you've got a chance. Yeah. It's going to be a bit tricky, but you just need to see this person and see that person. Of course, as it progresses, you realise, oh, hang on, the guy we were supposed to see, it's not him, it's his boss. We can't get in touch with his boss, so we've got to do this, do that. So you naturally will play several sessions of doing it straight before you turn to frustrated methods.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't quite work. I don't think it quite works.
No.
You know, 3 times we've tried it, 3 times it's failed.
It needs a better referee than me to pull it off, I think. I mean, it has got something quite delightful. It's got wandering bureaucrat table on it. It's one of my favourite things. Right. Okay, let's do the last roll, and it's 11. Now, for me, this was my favourite element, and this is, I've called this fun in space.
Yeah.
So there were various points in the overall campaign with episodes that were set in space.
Yes.
on board the March Harrier, the spacecraft, and to me they worked the best. So one example was when you had to rescue a stricken wreck of a ship, and you needed to go in your 0G vac suits, and go and try and rescue the crew, and respond to it. And I think it worked well because it was online, and you got that sense that you got the claustrophobia of it because you had communicators and travelling through the ship. And the reason why I enjoyed it is, although we had great fun in some of the other episodes and they're really good, we laughed a lot of the time. Did a lot of laughing.
A lot of laughter.
And it was a bit madcap. But I think the ones in space are the ones that were most tense. And so there was another episode in space where there was a stowaway, but there was also a glitch on the ship's computer. So they weren't sure whether it was a stowaway.
A space vampire. I think that was suggested at one point. Could be a space vampire.
Yeah, I think I might have said that.
Whatever one of those is. Could have been one of those.
Yeah. So
that's what Traveller's missing.
yeah, somebody. I think I suggested space vampire because somebody said, "Well, could it be, like an alien or something?" Well, that guy that you last had in the low berth, he looks a bit suspicious, and then you started getting it's a space vampire.
Low berth.
It's on board the ship. And it ended up being a journalist who was on the trail of the brooch, which was something I put in. It's not actually in the campaign.
I think you're right about this. Again, the good thing about the rescue, the 0G rescue of the stricken ship, was again it felt science fiction.
Yes,
it felt science fiction. I think all the best bits of the travel adventure felt like you were playing a science fiction role playing game. There's always that problem with Traveller that it lapses sometimes into what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like a bureaucracy filling in forms.
Like The Apprentice. Or something.
Yeah. Your task today.
Yeah.
Go and fill in all these forms and apply for a landing permit or something like that. It doesn't feel like science fiction. Whereas floating around a ship that's been hit by a missile and there's debris and cargo floating around, and that feels like Gravity, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like the film Gravity,
that
kind of thing.
And the way that was staged was very much inspired by Gravity. Yeah. So there was like cargo tethered and dangling like some kind of metallic jellyfish, and you had to kind of crawl your way through.
I think it's fair to say that the best bits of the Traveller adventure are the bits that feel science fiction. Bits in 0G, bits in the spaceship, Pasadi, the strange planet with strange religious people and monkeys. All those things feel.
And there is a moment at the end when you're in the trade war and working for Belindes where you get to have proper dogfights, proper fights.
Yeah, that was exciting. I mean, again, I'd never been. I always worry. I think I've said this in the Traveller podcast. I always worry about the game within a game. So a spaceship battle just feels like a spaceship board game rather than a role-playing game. But it was kind of exciting, intense, like you say, that sense of you're a space pirate waiting for a spaceship to come out of light speed and then attack it and, board it as well and do stuff like that. That was exciting.
Yeah. And you realise you feel incredibly vulnerable in a ship in the middle of space with lasers and cruise missiles.
Yeah, there's hit locations, isn't there?
Yeah.
It brings a little bit of RuneQuest brought in there. The same way that when you roll to the hit location in RuneQuest, you're thinking, not my head, not my chest, whatever, please, no. It was a bit like that with that, wasn't it?
And I think why we never had those back in the days that the original Games Designers Workshop rules were really complicated.
Yeah, they were.
Needed a protractor and we could never do the maths, but the Mongoose version is very light on its feet and more based on fun.
So, more based on fun. The Game Designers Workshop model wasn't based on fun, was it?
No.
It wasn't. When we were supposed to have fun with it, what are you thinking of? We've rewritten the Traveller rules so that now you can have fun. Well, thanks.
So, I think overall we have to say that we got a lot of satisfaction from it, and it probably will go down in history as a great achievement to complete it.
Oh yeah.
We saw it from the beginning to the end.
And I think as well, again, you look at a lot of these campaigns from way back, and you forget this is what
30
years old, 30 odd years old, 30 plus years old. And so some of the flaws, some of the things we're kind of moaning about now, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. You've got to cut it a bit of slack, haven't you? Because it was a new thing. It was a thing these people were grappling with, a campaign for Traveller. They've invented a game and now we're doing a big campaign for it. And I think we said that about Master of Lathotep. I think you said things about that there were bits in there where you thought it doesn't quite make sense. This. Yeah. And I certainly, in Borderlands, although Borderlands is great, there's bits in there that you think, are they just filling the page with words? What are they doing? What's all this about?
Yeah.
But that's because they were right at the beginning of role playing, weren't they? They were right there at the beginning, so it was all new, uncharted territory to some extent.
Yeah, and they were very prolific at this point, weren't they? So at the beginning of the 80s, there was a lot of stuff coming out. So you can imagine the deadlines were tight.
Yeah. And I suppose as well, it's probably that thing, isn't it, of, Is the travel adventure something that the designers played and then turned into an adventure?
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
But when you do that, you know from your own experience, when you write an adventure to play with your friends, you don't flesh bits out. You have bits in your head that you remember and bits where you've not written it down, but you think, well, if it goes that way, I'm going to do that, but I won't write that down. And maybe when you have to then repackage that as a commercial product for other people, it does lead to those gaps and bits that don't quite stack up. You know, maybe as you said, the players in travel adventure, it's difficult to motivate them. You've got that thing of every episode starting, or you're at a loose end. But maybe their players were motivated and played it in a very different way.
Yes.
And that's something they just perhaps thought everyone would do that. That's how you played it. That's how they played it. Why wouldn't everyone else play it like that? So there are those aspects, I think.
So as we close that chapter in our gaming history, playing that for the third time, in another 30 years' time, can you see us playing it again?
Probably, yeah. In the
we won't remember
retired role players residential home, sitting in a circle. Everyone else is watching Loose Women, and we're playing role playing in a corner.
And you'll still fall for the Space Monkeys.
Still fall for Space Monkeys. Won't be able to remember it.
And I suppose the biggest achievement of it all is actually the formation of another game group. That's the best thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we've got another game group out of it. That's true.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that, Blythy.
Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.
It's shed.
Okay, so I'm heading down to the bottom of the garden to Eddie's bargain shed. It looks like some kind of space pod this time. Hang on, I'll knock on.
Come in.
Can I just get through this lock here? Right. Hello there, Eddie.
Hello there, Dirk.
Now, Eddie, you were one of the brave travellers who beamed from this very shed into my dead under the stairs to play Traveller every fortnight.
That's correct.
So I just thought I'd ask you, what were your highlights?
I enjoyed most of it when I could attend. I think there was a few sessions that I missed, but for the most part, I liked the section that I remember. Thinking about it was the Hal's descent into madness towards the end, where he started to shoot people left, right, and centre, and we had no way of controlling him.
Yeah, so this was when you were space pirates, wasn't it? And getting on board ships, and the mild-mannered steward,
Bert, he was called.
yeah, suddenly went insane and started killing people indiscriminately.
That's right.
I think all the way through it, Ed, your character Brett was the one that was advising caution, which is not usually the role you play, is it?
Well, I always like a bit of adventure. I always like to get stuck in. I don't like to say, let's sit back, lads, but I think the medic, that was probably my extent to my role playing, I think, where I thought, a medic, well, he'll not be gung-ho, but considering he was failing all his, medic roles and succeeding all his gunnery roles, and I think he was slightly changing towards the end.
That was it. You were a medic who was as hopeless as a medic, but when it came to tactics and battlefield manoeuvres, you were kind of one step ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, it's just the look of the roles, I think.
Yeah.
It just made me that way.
Now, back in the day, you actually refereed this adventure. When you were playing, did any of it come back to you?
Not a bit.
Really?
Not one bit came back. I have no recollection of refereeing it at all. If I did, I think you said I'd got through quite far, but my view, I didn't think if I did, I'd refereed more than 2 or 3 games.
See, this was back in the day when we would play constantly, so we'd probably burn through this in a week, wouldn't we?
That's probably what happened, to tell you the truth. We probably started on a Sunday, and by Wednesday we were halfway through, and then we probably stopped for some reason, and then went back, and then that got brushed out to my memory.
Like so many things.
Like so many things, for some strange reason.
So what do you think of Traveller coming back to it? Is it, it's not a game that we've been playing around the table. Is it something that you think we should build into our regular repertoire?
I think as a game, I think it was so suited for Roll20, and it was far simpler than any other games we've played. I mean, it was just a case of rolling above 8 with 2d6 for those who don't know, and that was so simple. I mean, you go on about Tunnels and Trolls being a very simple game, but when we were playing it online, it just seemed, God, I bet the rules with this must have taken up a page, because it would just roll above 8, you succeed.
I think what Mongoose have done is taken that mechanic, because I think that mechanic is applied in the earlier editions that we used to play, but it's less consistently applied, so it doesn't work in quite the same way. Similarly, some of the vehicle and starship stuff is more complicated in the earlier versions, but it seemed fairly lightweight, didn't it, in this version?
Yeah, the starship thing I thought went really well. I think that worked really good on Roll20.
Yeah.
Far better than you could around a table, because you had the screen as your star map and you could move the tokens that are supplied with Roll20, and it worked on a laptop. And maybe that's one of the things, because it's a sci-fi game, it works on a laptop better because it's a computer based, isn't it? So it's kind of almost fits.
So before I go, there's one challenge I need to put to you. Right? I know that on one occasion for one of the sessions you nearly turned down the chance of playing Traveller to watch Taken 3. Why was that? What are you trying to tell me?
Well, we'd had carpets fitted all the way through the house and I was knackered. So I sat down and I thought, right, I'm not playing Traveller now, I'm watching Taken 3.
Taken 3? Not Taken 1 or 2. 3? It's the worst one.
20 minutes in I realised it was bad. So then I joined you on Traveller. I couldn't stand any more Liam Neeson.
I'll let you off, but be aware that I've noted it in Dirk's book. Cheers, Eddie.
Okay, doke.
Postbag!
Well, there's a general absence of positive affirmations that I crave as a needy games master, so maybe I'll have more luck in my postbag. The ex-boat has arrived with these messages from the other players. Okay, here's Steve, who played Captain Ollie. He said, "The highlight for me was giving me the push to start playing again. Worth its weight in diamonds. And also getting the chance to play a game that I've owned for half of my life, but only ever looked at. It was good that in the game that could be as goofy as ours, there were moments of genuine tension and paranoia. I'm particularly thinking about flushing out the stowaway." Okay, thanks for that, Steve. Here's Joe, who played the neurotic pilot, Frank. He said, "The Traveller adventure was great. There was a feeling of embarking on a potentially epic story. We had plenty of laughs and moments of real tension. Some highlights included the cold sweat that Frank broke out into when he tried to carefully manoeuvre the dropship to rescue his team in a high-speed car chase, and also the tense Mexican standoff at Aramax. The variety of planetary experiences was exciting, each quite different. They really led to the feeling that we were travelling through the galaxy and absorbing a completely new experiences. The political conspiratorial aspect was really good, giving depth and something to get us all thinking. The pace and the story worked well, keeping us guessing until the very last moment. I am now a massive Traveller fan." Oh, thanks for that, Joe. That's good. Okay, next is Ben, who played Franco. He said, "I thought the political and trade elements helped to set the scene and tone of the game. These were expertly highlighted through the intergalactic Brooklyn accent, which was worth tuning the ear to. I love geeking out to the space-age kit viewed through the 1980s tech and expectations. I thought the gameplay was simple and made it fun to play. I think as a group we tried to role-play with a capital R. which added to my enjoyment of the game. And this was enhanced by the way that we use the rules in order to facilitate the game rather than hinder it. As a result, I thought it was great fun. I must admit to getting a bit obsessed with the concept of the space dog pirates. My dog now responds to the name Gavudzen. Thanks, Ben. I should add that Ben was the first player in my years and years of experiences playing RPGs that actually fell asleep during play during one of my games. He was snoring and everything. He said he'd had a hard day, or laying carpets or whatever the excuse is. Perhaps I'll need to work harder on my refereeing skills. Maybe next time. But I'm going to pack away the Traveller Adventure for another 30 years until we get a chance to play in that retirement home. I really want to see if I can make the bureaucracy scenario work effectively. Maybe in another 30 years I'll get the chance. I want to say thanks to all the other letters we've received about Traveller. I'm going to respond to them on thegrognardfiles.com. Over this month, we've had a tremendous boost to our Patreon campaign. Thank you all who support us with a tip in the beret. The podcast will always be free, but the tips you provide helps us to cover the costs of running the podcast and to find material for future episodes. I'll do a report for Patreons at the end of the year so you can get an idea of how we've used your contributions. Importantly, it's encouraged us to do other projects such as the fanzine and the online club. We had the first game, the Sea Caves for RuneQuest. Really good fun and a real sense of creating a community around this bobbins. What you've got to remember is to play is the thing, and the next game will be early in the new year. Look out for that on Patreon to put your name forward. So I want to say thank you to Robert Fisher, Miles Cochran and Jason Connolly for their $1 a month contribution. They're now honorary members of the Armchair Adventurers Club. As are the following who have joined or raised their tip to $3.50 before the end of September 2016 to secure a hard copy of this year's fanzine. So this is to say thank you to Tony Farina, Michael Beck, Curtis DeLedge, Chris Farina, Chris Harvey, James Turner, Chris Stevens, Callum, Neil Bloomfield and Simon Parrins. Thank you very much. For those at $5 a month, I usually give a virtual gift rolled from a table from the subject covered in the episode. There are not many tables in this adventure. There are wandering bureaucrats, which might come in handy if you're ordering a fishing permit, but I thought I'd go for the found item table for Aramanx. Imagine being on a planet with only the clothes you stand up in, and you have a business meeting interrupted by the building you're in being torpedoed. Grab what you can and make yourself safe after making a difficult recon roll. So here we go. Adam Brooks on a 1d6. Well, you got 1. That's you get some dehydrated food. So that's a jerky to chew on. Thanks, Adam. Okay, Graham Kinneber. 5. That's ammunition, which is useless unless you want to chuck bullets at people. Okay. Next up is Adam Williams. Thanks, Adam. And you get 3 camping gear. So you can go glamping in the war zone with your chintzy billy can. Richard Spainhauer is next. And you got 4. That's electronics equipment. Well, thanks, Richard. So it says here you can have infrared goggles so you can find your keys when you lose them. And finally, Bill Foreman. Thanks, Bill. You get Well, you get a medical kit, a band-aid to stick, and a stick of witch hazel. There you go. Well, thank you very much for your support to all of you. Now, I'm really excited to bring you the next episode. It's another 2-parter, so just cover your ears at Daily Dwarf, for we're going to look at the UK rival to White Dwarf, Imagine magazine. And Paul Coburn, the editor, will be providing an insider's view of TSR UK and the UK game scene. Until then, I'm off to watch Taken 3. Yeah, honestly, Taken 3. Unbelievable. Adios, amigos.